One of the most misunderstood areas of genealogy and historical research involves racial and ethnic labels found on census records and government documents. Researchers often discover terms like mulatto, Indian, black, colored, white, free person of color, Mexican, quadroon, octoroon, and assume those labels were always accurate, scientific, or consistently applied. But historical reality was far more complicated. These labels changed over time, varied by region, depended on the recorder, and were heavily influenced by politics, colonization, segregation laws, and social pressure. Tonight, we are going to explore how census categories evolved, how identities were erased or altered, and why genealogists must understand historical context before making conclusions about ancestry. Many people assume census records are objective facts. But census records are human-created documents shaped by the attitudes and policies of their time. Enumerators frequently guessed someone's race by appearance, relied on neighbors for information, used local assumptions, altered identities to fit government rules, and simplified complex family backgrounds. The same individual might appear as white in one census, mulatto in another, Indian in local records, and black in later records. Sometimes the changes were accidental, sometimes they were intentional, and sometimes they reflected survival strategies in oppressive societies. Historical census labels were not consistent scientific definitions. They were social and political categories. Some terms reflected ancestry, others reflected appearance, class, legal status, or segregation laws. The meanings also shifted dramatically over time. For example, mulatto generally referred to a person of mixed European and African ancestry, but in practice the term could also be applied to Native Americans, Mediterranean populations, mixed communities, triracial isolates, and anyone who did not fit rigid racial expectations. Likewise, Indian could refer to tribal affiliation, reservation status, local reputation, appearance, or political classification. Context matters enormously. Researchers often overinterpret the term mulatto. The word itself simply indicated perceived mixed ancestry. It did not provide a DNA breakdown. It did not specify tribes, it did not confirm Native American ancestry, and it certainly did not function like a modern ethnicity estimate. In some regions, communities with Native ancestry were labeled mulatto. In others, the same families were labeled Indian. Elsewhere, they were recorded as black or colored. The classification often depended on local politics, segregation laws, anti-Indian policies, anti-black laws, land disputes, and social acceptance. This is why genealogists must use multiple sources, not census labels alone. Many researchers become excited when they discover Indian on a census record. But context is essential. Sometimes the label truly reflected tribal citizenship or native identity. Other times it reflected local rumor or appearance. And in many cases, Native people were intentionally reclassified. Families were frequently relabeled as white, mulatto, black, Mexican, or colored. This happened for many reasons: forced assimilation, anti-Indian laws, land policies, boarding school systems, racial segregation, and as survival strategies, entire communities experienced ethnic reclassification over generations. This is one reason why Native American genealogy can become extremely difficult to document historically. Ethnic erasure did not always happen accidentally. Sometimes it was systemic. Throughout American history, institutions often attempted to erase or absorb minority identities. Examples include Native boarding schools, forced English naming systems, anti-miscegenation laws, blood quantum policies, tribal disenrollment, racial passing, and legal segregation systems. Many families changed identities to survive economically or socially. Others had identities assigned to them by outsiders. Genealogists must recognize that historical records were created inside systems of power. Ethnic erasure is not only historical, it still happens today. Modern examples include dismissing mixed identities, reducing complex ancestry into simplistic categories, assuming ethnicity from skin tone, ignoring community history, and spreading unsupported genealogy claims online. DNA testing has helped many families reconnect with lost histories. But DNA can also be misunderstood. Ethnicity estimates are statistical models. They are not tribal enrollment documents. They are not cultural identity papers. And they are not replacements for historical research. Responsible genealogy requires balance between documentation, oral history, community context, and DNA evidence. Genealogy is detective work, and one census entry should never determine an entire ancestral identity. Researchers should compare multiple census decades, birth and death records, marriage licenses, land records, tax lists, probate files, church records, migration routes, military records, and DNA evidence. Patterns matter more than isolated labels. The broader historical setting often explains why identities changed over time. Responsible genealogy means accepting complexity. History is messy. Families were complicated. Communities blended together. And racial systems were often artificial political constructions. Good researchers avoid romanticized ancestry claims, unsupported tribal assertions, internet mythology, cherry-picked evidence. Instead, they focus on documentation, collaboration, transparency, historical context, and intellectual honesty. Sometimes the answer is uncertain, and that is okay. Historical ethnic categories were never simple. They reflected colonization, migration, social pressure, legal systems, survival, and changing definitions of race itself. Understanding these realities helps us become better genealogists and better historians. It reminds us that people cannot always be reduced to a single box on a census form. The records matter, but context matters even more. Thank you so much for joining me for this presentation on historical census categories, identity classification, and ethnic erasure in American records. These conversations can sometimes be emotional and controversial, but they are important for understanding both genealogy and American history honestly. In future presentations, we will continue exploring Native American genealogy, DNA evidence, chromosome mapping, historical migration, census interpretation, colonial history, and responsible genealogical research methods. If you enjoyed this presentation, please like, subscribe, follow, and share.